The Detroit Lions kick off their 2024 NFL season in just a couple of days. Sunday Night Football is right around the corner, and with this week's preparation, the Detroit Lions will be ready to welcome the Los Angeles Rams back to Ford Field for the very first time since defeating them in the 2023 Wild Card round. Now, the Detroit Lions, of course, going into this game have massive expectations. They want to win this game. They want to win big to open the season for the second year in a row. And this year, they want to open up the season with a win in front of their fans. In a sold out stadium with massive implications and a potential playoff matchup, this game has a lot riding on it for being a week one matchup. And the Detroit Lions are going to need all hands on deck if they want to beat the Rams in week one. However, that may not be the case, as we have gotten some recent injury updates. We've gotten some recent injury news, as well as a couple of players that potentially might not play in week one versus the Rams that the Lions very much would want to rely on. So, with that being said, let's take a look at the injury report, take a look at some of the roster moves, and really take a look at the shape that this Detroit Lions team is in going into week one. Now, overall, the Detroit Lions are getting a lot healthier. And I think overall, they're in a pretty good shape going into week one of the NFL season. The offensive line is full, right? Earlier in the offseason, especially during OTAs and mini camps, it seemed like you could throw a dart at this roster and that player would not be playing in training camp. I mean, you're talking about Taylor Decker, Kevin Zeitler, Frank Ragnow, Penei Sewell, Graham Glasgow, all missed time throughout OTAs in training camp. Jahmyr Gibbs was missing time. David Montgomery was missing time. All of these different offensive weapons weren't on the field for the Detroit Lions because they weren't healthy enough to do so. But fast forward a couple of weeks, if not a couple of months down the line, and the Lions look pretty good. The offensive line is full and healthy from start to finish, from left to right. This team is healthy along the offensive line, and they fully expect their starting five to be available on Sunday night. That being Decker at left tackle, Zeitler at left guard, Frank Ragnow at center with Graham Glasgow at the right guard and Penei Sewell at the right tackle. Jahmyr Gibbs, a player that missed time throughout training camp and missed time throughout OTAs and mini camps, is healthy as well. Dan Campbell has said that they expect Jahmyr Gibbs to be good to go for week one, and they expect him to get a healthy load of the carries. The cornerbacks are returning to this roster. Of course, Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw, Carlton Davis, all suffering injuries throughout the training camp and preseason processes. They've returned to practice. They look good to go, and they are taking part in 11-on-11 drills and 7-on-7 opportunities. The defensive line is getting relatively healthy. Aiden Hutchinson's available. Marcus Davenport's available. James Houston is up and around. Levi Onwuzurike, for the first time really in his career, is fully healthy going into an NFL season. Lee McNeil is fully healthy and recovered from the injury that he suffered at the end of last year. Even DJ Reader, who we will talk about in a little bit, is returning to this defensive line fully healthy. And then Sam Laporta, another player that was in a very similar spot to Jahmyr Gibbs, did play throughout preseason, did play in training camp very much, worked a lot of one-on-one with the trainers. He is healthy, and even though he may not be 100%, is expected to play on Sunday Night Football. Now, let's start off with DJ Reader. A couple of days ago, the prized free agent acquisition was brought up from the PUP list. He started the offseason on the physically unable to perform list. About 3 or 4 days ago, he was officially activated from that list, meaning now he can practice with the team. He is eligible to play in week one versus the Los Angeles Rams. And throughout practices so far those last couple of days, him and Aleem McNeil have been the two starting defensive tackles on the interior. Dan Campbell's mentioned it a couple of times, saying that those two look really good together, that they're a great combination and a great duo on the interior of that defensive line. But he's also mentioned over the last couple of days and continues to bring up that DJ Reader, despite being healthy enough and despite not being injured anymore, there's a big difference between that and being ready to play in an NFL game. There's a big difference between being healthy and being conditioned, between being healthy and being ready. Those are two very different things. And to Dan Campbell, they are not exclusive, right? One can be true without the other. And there's a big chance that DJ Reader doesn't play versus the Los Angeles Rams. There's a big chance that he might not play until week 2 versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was the original return date that they were expecting DJ Reader to be at when they signed him out of free agency this offseason. It was never expected necessarily that DJ Reader was going to be healthy for week 1. And while a lot of fans thought that they would be, and a lot of fans and media thought that there was a good chance Reader has returned, there's also a solid chance that, especially with the track record the Lions have of being a little extra cautious, holding their players out a little bit longer than maybe they could be, there's a really strong chance that DJ Reader does not play in week 1 against the Los Angeles Rams across from Aleem McNeil, and that would be quite a significant blow to the Detroit Lions defensive line. They've already lost John Kaminsky for a majority of the season. They just put Broderick Martin on not season-ending IR, but will be gone for at least the first month of the season. And while Levi Onwuzurike has returned, and of course you have some versatile pieces like Josh Paschal, the Lions don't really have another true run-stopping defensive tackle to go alongside Aleem McNeil. So there's going to be a lot of rotation and a lot of different looks that the Lions see if DJ Reader is not available. Now, likely there's going to be a little bit of a middle ground here. DJ Reader might play, but he might not play every down. He might just play, 15 to 20 downs, right? Get his feet wet for the season, get back into shape, get back into conditioning. And even in those 15 to 20 snaps, I think he could make a large impact. But again, there's a good chance that DJ Reader plays less than 50% of snaps for the Detroit Lions on Sunday nights because, quite frankly, he just might not be in the shape to play an entire game just yet. He might not have the endurance built up, might not have that strength back to his game. And if he's not ready, the Detroit Lions will not play him. Now, a couple of other injury reports this week. The Lions have a safety duo that has not been at practice. Both Ifeatu Melifonwu and Lawrence Strickland, the undrafted rookie free agent Cinderella story from this offseason, have both missed practice over the last couple of days. With Ifeatu Melifonwu, I have heard rumors that it is an Achilles injury. However, of course, with him still being with trainers and stuff, it is probably a minor Achilles injury. If it was a tear or something like that, his season would officially be over. That is not the case, so I know that throwing around Achilles injury can be very scary. That is not necessarily the case. Ifeatu Melifonwu does have a lower body ankle Achilles injury, but it's not a season-ending one, and potentially you could still see number 6 return to the field as early as this Sunday. Ifeatu Melifonwu played in the Kansas City Chiefs game in week 2 of the preseason, got injured in that game, and has not started or played since. Missed the rest of training camp, missed week 3 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, there is a chance that Ifeatu Melifonwu does not play versus the Los Angeles Rams. A player that was instrumental to beating the Rams last year in the wild card round might not be available as Ifeatu continues to struggle to stay on the field due to health concerns. Now, with that being said, the Detroit Lions are significantly deeper at safety than they are at defensive tackle. Of course, you still have Brian Branch, who's available and healthy. You still have Kirby Joseph, who's available and healthy. You have Brandon Joseph, the undrafted rookie free agent from 2 seasons ago that was very impressive in the preseason. He is healthy and ready to play. So I do believe that the Detroit Lions have the depth available to work around Ifeatu's absence. But of course, if you have number 6 on the field, that makes your job a lot easier. That allows you to run more defensive plays. It allows you to have another playmaker on the field. And if Ifeatu Melifonwu cannot go, that will be yet another blow to a defense and a secondary that has a lot to prove this season. Now, in more exciting news, in more positive news, the Detroit Lions have made another roster move. They have signed Trevor Nowaske from the Arizona Cardinals to return to the Detroit Lions linebacking core. The Saginaw Valley State University alumni, for those of you that are not familiar with the area, Saginaw Valley is a small Division II school in Saginaw, Michigan. The SVSU alumni was a Detroit Lion for a short time in his NFL career. The 2023 preseason, he signed with the Detroit Lions as an undrafted rookie, where in 3 games, he played really well. He had 3 games, 7 tackles, a forced fumble, which resulted in a touchback, which was instrumental again in defeating the Carolina Panthers in week 3 of that preseason. He then went on to the NFL regular season, not only being on the Detroit Lions practice squad, but being called up to the active roster and being rostered by the 53 for a majority of the season, Trevor Nowaske was a player the Lions really liked as a linebacker, really liked as a special teams force, and a player that they really wanted to keep around for the long term. Now, when players began to get healthy and CJ Gardner-Johnson returned and Aleem McNeil and James Houston and all of these players began returning to the roster for a playoff push, Trevor Nowaske was unfortunately a casualty of those returns. He signed with the Arizona Cardinals, where this offseason he played 3 games, had 11 tackles and 1 tackle for loss. But after a strong preseason, didn't end up making the Arizona Cardinals roster, returns to the Detroit Lions this offseason, which officially gives the Lions 7 linebackers on the season. Now, the Detroit Lions did have an open roster spot when they initially made their 52, right? They left off that 53rd player. They knew they wanted to work with something. They knew they had a couple of players in mind that they wanted to add to the roster. So they wanted to leave that spot open and available for those players. Trevor Nowaske was that player, a player that has played the Sam linebacker position in the NFL for a couple of years now. He's a pretty good player the Lions really like as a developmental project. And for a position with the Detroit Lions, that Sam linebacker position that they don't have much depth at. Behind their starter, there really isn't any depth, right? They tried Matthew Betts, it didn't work. They tried James Houston, it did not work. They don't have a true backup at Sam linebacker. Now they do with Trevor Nowaske, and I think he will not only stick around the roster and, of course, make the roster, but I do think if there is an injury, there is a good chance that we see Trevor Nowaske see the field a bit more because the Lions trust him in that spot. Of course, still having to earn that time and spot, but things are starting to look that way. And then the final piece of information and the final roster move over the last couple of days is the Detroit Lions officially putting John Kaminsky onto season returning injury reserve. Now, despite John Kaminsky being placed on IR, there is a designation for return. John Kaminsky unfortunately tore his ACL in the offseason. He tore his ACL in the preseason, right, during training camp, during minicamp. And despite that, there is a possibility that he does return. Of course, the Lions wouldn't put him on injured reserve with that designation for return if there was no shot that he was coming back. However, the earliest we'll likely see John Kaminsky is late January, if at all, as of course that MCL tear is a massive injury to return from. So now that Trevor Nowaske took that 53rd roster spot, John Kaminsky is no longer on the roster, which opens up another roster spot. The Lions are back down to 52 with an opportunity to fill that spot before their first game. Now, personally, I think this role will be filled by Kyle Pico, the 7-year NFL defensive tackle, the big, heavy run stopper in the middle, isn't going to put up big numbers, isn't going to be super flashy, but will do his job in the middle and stuff the run. Is a player that not only started for the Detroit Lions with their first team defense a majority of training camp, not only didn't play throughout the preseason, but was told numerous times by the coaching staff that he had nothing to worry about for this roster. Now, of course, the Lions coaching staff could have just been saying that, and they could have said, hey, don't worry about it. Hey, we're going to keep you. And they might have lied. That is a possibility. But this Lions coaching staff and this Lions front office tends to be pretty straight shooting with their players. They don't like to disrespect their players with lies, and they don't like to lie to the fans, the players, or the media. There's a good chance that I think Kyle Pico does return to this roster. And I think that the Lions are maybe waiting a couple of days because they want that a little bit of an upper hand, that little bit of an extra boost at the last second, where they might sign Kyle Pico within a day or two of the game. He knows the system. He's worked with the starters. The starters have worked with him. As long as he's staying in shape this week, the Lions could potentially sign him as late as Saturday night and have Kyle Pico start for the Detroit Lions on the defensive line next to Aleem McNeil. That gives the Rams absolutely zero time to game plan around him, absolutely zero time to change the running game, absolutely zero time to change any of the game planning schemes. And they very well may add Kyle Pico back to this roster now that the open spot is available. Now, that is purely speculative. That does not have any basis to it necessarily, but just kind of how I see the roster playing out with a player that, again, the Lions told all preseason was going to be okay on this roster, and then seemingly went full 180 and decided not to re-sign him. So with that being said, that is my prediction for the roster, but John Kaminsky is officially on injury reserve. He will no longer count against the Lions' 53-man active roster. With that being said, That is all I have for you guys today. That is the injury update, the roster moves, everything that has changed within this Detroit Lions roster over the last couple of days. I do apologize for the inconsistent uploads over the last couple of weeks. I've moved back to school. I've had a lot of training. I've had soccer and all kinds of other jobs and stuff on campus. So I apologize for the kind of here and there hit or miss uploads as of recently. Things should get back to normal within the next couple of days or so. I'm trying to stockpile some videos and, of course, get a routine going. But with all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. If you have yet to subscribe to the channel, please make sure you go down and do so. It helps the channel out so much. And again, like I said, I'm trying to get back to those consistent uploads, get you 3-4 Detroit Lions videos a week, and continue to give you updates on this roster as they shoot for a Super Bowl. With all of that being said, if you have yet to subscribe, please go down below and do so. Hit the bell notification so you never miss an upload. And with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know what you think of the roster moves down in the comments below. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.